So whether you are looking to improve your financial situation, your happiness, your family's overall well-being, your physical well-being, or possibly even love, Bathlon will always have something to share and something to say that will help you reach and probably surpass your highest potential.
Welcome to Influence to Death, your guide for navigating the wild world of wellness influencing. Hi, and welcome back to Influence to Death. I am Victoria LaFont.
I'm Hannah Wright.
And today we are going to cover the mysterious case of Dr. Mercola and the causal plane medium. And if you don't know what that means now, by the end of the episode, you unfortunately will.
I'm just smiling so hard right now. I'm so excited about this episode.
Yeah, this is a wild one. We're going to go into some crazy nooks and crannies. Okay, but we have some updates first, and then we will dive right in.
Okay, so our update is about our last episode on the carnivore diet. I missed this key piece of information when we were researching for the show. And last year, apparently, Paul Saladino, who is one of the big influencers around carnivore that we mentioned. I mean, he's a pretty big deal. Everybody knows who he is. He has his whole supplement line, yada, yada, yada. I guess now he isn't full carnivore anymore. As of last year, he started eating plant foods again, although I think he may be pretty limited in his selection. I think he's like a fruit only, maybe fruit and like potatoes or something, because I guess those have less anti-nutrients anyways. Because he started feeling really crappy.
Mm-hmm.
And one article said that his testosterone levels were dropping. Like he just wasn't feeling good. He was tired. He wasn't sleeping good from eating full carnivore, meat and animal based only. And so he started adding in some plant foods, I guess like fruits, and ta-da, he feels a lot better.
The miracle.
So I think that is a pretty important thing. And I have to say, the reason I didn't find it is that he's not really advertising that, like yelling from the rooftops. Like I think you probably should be if you come to that conclusion that you're, advocating for this all meat diet and you feel great initially. And then you're like, oh God, I do not feel good anymore. Mm-hmm. Probably should tell people about that more vocally, but you can find it. We'll link it and you can read about it.
Yeah, I mean, Hannah, we researched so much for that episode. I researched for hours and hours and hours. That information is not easy to find. So
I found it on accident. It was one of the, how Google will autofill for you. Uh-huh. And I was Googling something and it said, why did Paul Saladino quit carnivore? And I was like, what? What is this? So thanks, Google.
Yeah, thanks, Google. Yeah, I'm with you. I think he should, to me, it would create such respect in my heart for him if he just came out and said, hey, guess what? This is what's happening now. And I know I've told this story before, but I'm 1,000 years old, so I'm going to repeat myself. I was on Facebook one day and David Perlmutter, was at one point very, very bullish about things being low carb and no sugar and like that. And he was like that even about honey. And I saw on Facebook, it was just in my feed. I don't even think I followed him. He was like, hey, I just want everyone to know that I've learned new information about honey. And I think it's a wonderful food. Like, I actually think it's a really wonderful food for people even that have metabolic disorders and like that. And I lost my shit in the comment section. And I was like, thank you so much for saying that you updated your information. Like, that's to me the highest type of influencing. It's like, yeah, let's show people that we learn new things and that information changes and things can be updated. So come on, Paul Saladino.
Yeah, we believe in you. You can do it. You can.
Yeah, we believe in you, man.
Admit it. It's okay. We're here.
Maybe now that he's eating some fruit, he's going to have this like, proverbial come to Jesus and his brain will work a little better. And
yeah,
we'll
just wait and see.
Yeah.
If you guys want to find us You can find us at influencetodeath@gmail.com. That's our email, obviously. Send us anything you want. Really, we'll read it and reply.
Yeah.
On Instagram at Influence to Death, and also on Substack at Influence Pod. You can also just search Influence to Death on Substack and you should find us. Like, follow, subscribe. Is that what I say?
Yeah.
Like, follow, subscribe.
We're actually not very good influencers ourselves, which is the irony of this entire podcast. Yeah, I think if people like us and they give us a review and then they subscribe or they follow us, it helps other people find the podcast. So if you like this podcast and you want other people to find it, like apparently I just learned this past weekend because I was at this very cool business retreat. The most important part of getting found online, like optimization wise, is to be in the, like, if you like this, then categories of podcasts and YouTube and like that. So when people leave reviews, it helps us get found.
Yes. Awesome.
Okay. So I really feel like this episode is, it's like a Nancy Drew kind of episode. Like I've felt very like Sherlock Holmes style. So Dr. Mercola, he is the godfather of influencers. He was the OG. And I have kind of gone back and forth. Like I have wondered if it's just because of my age, like he's the person that I was first exposed to. But I do remember being online, you know, from like the mid 1990s or like late 1990s on. And there were not people who had, you know, this huge reach at that time for years, and especially not in the wellness space. And that's kind of where I was active until Dr. Mercola. And so just out of nowhere, I remember like getting email after email after email in my inbox. I think I'd ordered like fish oil or something, or, you know, like read an article, and he had really started the, now like we're just so used to that. You know, you order a shirt and then you get 10,000 emails for the rest of your life. Our company. We're so used to that it's like we're blind to it. We have like email blindness. But at that time, it was pretty rare. And I think he was the first wellness person in my memory to get on that bandwagon, and he amassed an enormous following. So I think I started to really notice that happening for him in like 2010, maybe even a little bit earlier. So it's been many years. And at this point, he has close to 2 million followers on Facebook, 500,000 on Instagram, 400,000 plus on X, formerly Twitter. Who knows how many people on his contact list, the people he emails every day, but he has a huge reach. And that's an important point for this episode because he influences a lot of people. So his background is he's an osteopath, and he practiced clinically for a lot of years. He had a one-to-one practice, but he stopped seeing patients in 2009 to focus on his brand. This kind of is, I'm like, does it really matter? He's worth a lot of money. His net worth in 2017 was over $100 million. I'm sort of like, if you're doing good work and giving back and, you know, you're integral, go hard. That's my attitude. But he's done very well for himself. I think that's another point it's foundational to this. He's made a lot of money based on that reach. So probably about 10 years ago, so 2014, 2015, you know, people kind of started to question what he was saying. And it started, the first article I can find is an article in Chicago Magazine by Brian Smith. And the title was Joseph Mercola, Visionary or Quack. We're going to come back to this article a little bit, but that was just kind of like the earliest account I could find where people were questioning what he was saying. He does have a pretty like diverse message, you know, about a lot of different topics, supplements, tanning beds he was selling. Do you have you ever ordered anything?
So tan. I've never ordered anything, but like you said, he was the first like health influencer I ever was exposed to. Like my mom was super into him. I think still is super into him, all of her friends. And I just remember seeing him. He's just so tan, like, but he doesn't, it's unnatural looking. He's like a little, it doesn't fit his doesn't match up with everything else.
Yeah.
And I remember that he advocated for tanning beds,
Mm-hmm.
which was confusing to me because my teenage self loved tanning beds, but I also knew that they were really bad for you. And then there's this health doctor saying, oh, they're really good for you. And so
Right.
I think it, like, at the time, it gave my mom permission to give me permission to go to the tanning bed because she was,
oh my God, you
Dr.
love Dr.
Mercola.
Mercola because he was like the in with your mom to go tan. Did you put the little stickers on your hip? What did they have? Like little Playboy bunnies and stars?
I didn't do that.
Okay. You get a pass, Anna.
Thanks. Did not do that. But I had, like, I had acne. And so I was like, I felt like it helped it heal.
It probably did, right?
Better,
Yeah.
Or just masked it when I was tan. But.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I mean, okay. So this point is, again, a thread throughout our entire existence, me and Hannah's existence, but definitely throughout this podcast, where there is a grain of truth. And like, there are light spectrums, like UVB hits our skin. We use that in our bodies to synthesize vitamin D, and that's wonderful. And there have actually been these really, really interesting analysis of like, okay, there is a risk associated with sun exposure specifically. I don't know if they've looked at, different spectrums, multi-spectrum tanning beds, but that the benefits of sun exposure done responsibly, like we're not getting burned out there, are much, much greater than the risk compared when we compare like all of the benefits of vitamin D and like that. So that does exist, but it's like, I actually am not familiar with the type of tanning bed he sold. Maybe it was a UVB tanning bed. I'm not sure. But that's kind of a big deal with him, is he would put out a lot of information and the wording would be really hyperbolic and exaggerated. And there was not much caveat. That is in many ways just the way it goes in the world of marketing. But when we're talking about health, and again, we have this super wide reach, it's important to give people some detail. So that was not necessarily his strong suit. So first article, like I said, 2012. So, that's kind of when people were kind of starting to question, but then it really, really ramped up during the COVID-19 pandemic. Mercola and, his company were warned by the FDA for falsely advertising the efficacy of high doses of a few different nutrients that they sold as supplements. Again, that's like another caveat. So vitamin C, vitamin D3, quercetin, and pyrrolstilbene were different supplements. I think that this was the FDA's language, is that they couldn't speak about those nutrients in a way where they would mitigate, prevent, treat, diagnose, or cure COVID-19. Did you see him saying, making claims?
He was one of them. Yes. I feel like there were a lot of people doing that. And the part that bugs me is, like, there are studies showing all those nutrients, vitamin C, D3, like, they're all good for the immune system. We know that they have these incredible benefits, but it's like the person making these claims is selling those as supplements.
Yeah.
And the same thing happened with, what's that company, the MLM that sells essential oils? And
Young Living.
Yeah. Like their thieves oil. I think there was this thing, they basically made these claims insinuating that it could kill the coronavirus, which is like crazy to me. It's crazier because there's no science, or like, that's not, but they're like, oh, you can buy our detox, our spray or wash with this in it. And so, yeah, I did see Mercola doing that. I saw a lot of other natural holistic people kind of along the same lines. And I think there's like a really important, there's a differentiation between someone saying, hey, these things can help support you, can help your recovery, can help this, and this. This is what the science shows us. This is what I've seen in my patients or clients or whatever, versus this will cure you, or this will prevent you from getting this really scary virus. And here's the link to my product. It's on sale.
We just posted a meme on Instagram a couple days ago that I thought was freaking hilarious. And it's very apropos, where it was like, you're on a website and it's like the 5 things you need to do to feel better. And it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And they all say, buy my product. buy my product, buy my product, buy my product. I mean, there is like a marketing and sales strategy that is very effective that uses that. It's not always skeezy. In my opinion, it's not skeezy when people are really transparent and they say, like, here's what we see in our office and here's what we see in the research. And it's not hyperbolic. Apparently, that's just what works for me. But also, it's like there's the truth. So at that time, it really looked like he was making claims that were like the cure. I pulled up a couple studies if people do want to look at them on vitamin D supplementation and COVID. One is a meta and systematic review. So it is a statistical, basically like a amalgamation of different studies that they've statistically combined to get an outcome. That was equivocal. So it was kind of like, we sort of can't tell either way. And then there's another study on someone's vitamin D status. So how much is actually in their body and the risk of severe COVID. There is good evidence. We can't just say like, if you take this form of vitamin D and get your numbers to this level, like you're safe. It just doesn't work. Just biochemistry doesn't work that way. Marketing though does work that way a lot of the time. So, this is maybe something that people don't know. When we work and do copywriting or content creation for people who own wellness businesses, we have to be very, very careful what we say, because even though supplements aren't regulated directly by the FDA, so like a pharmaceutical drug will go through rounds and rounds and rounds of controlled testing. Yes, there are problems with it, but that framework is in place. A supplement doesn't have that. But if people are harmed, the FDA comes. If you make certain claims that aren't backed by research, the FDA comes. So you have to be careful with what you say. And there are actually even classes, that teach you as a writer, like here's what you can say and here's what you can't. The thing that comes up for me that's really interesting is like somebody like Mercola, who has this enormous reach. And my guess is like, an army of content writers creating what he's publishing. I'm not sure why, they were using that language that was problematic, but yeah, the FDA came for them. That started during the COVID-19 pandemic. And that's actually when he started to get really seen by YouTube and Google. So Alphabet is that parent company that owns Google and YouTube. And they threatened to take videos down from his YouTube site. That is when that first started, was in 2021. Then that sort of snowballed into, he took some content down apparently that had to do with the COVID-19 vaccines. They allowed his content to stay up. But then in 2022, they changed their policy to any type of information that they deemed misinformation around vaccines would be taken down. It was sort of like the moment that policy changed, his account was banned and a lot of his content was taken down. And actually the following year in 2023, Mercola sued YouTube, which is a pretty wild, that is an enormous, enormous company. But his company is too, right? He's a formidable force. So he filed that lawsuit. In that same year, in 2023, the executives of his company let people know, they complained that JP Morgan had closed some of their bank accounts, which is pretty intense. Also, we actually found a letter from Jimmy Petronas. He is the CFO, so the chief financial officer of the state of Florida, which is where Mercola's company is located. And he's writing a letter to JP Morgan, basically asking why the accounts were closed. So a lot of this information is not well documented. Like, we were just finding it on Wikipedia or it's been in blogs. So we're trying to do our due diligence to find like, okay, did JP Morgan really close Mercola's accounts? And it does seem, based on this letter from Jimmy Petronas, that they did. So we have a link to that. So COVID was not kind to Dr. Mercola. From a business perspective, a lot of pretty heavy stuff was going on for his company. And my guess is probably for him personally, it's like, I do believe that even like the biggest influencer, somebody that we might not see in a personal way, it's like, I still do believe that it's like, yeah, he's running his business and he wants to make money, but my guess is he is trying to help people. And so this may be completely naive, but in my heart of hearts, I'm like, I think he probably believes a lot of what he says, whether or not he attaches the caveats that, we may be interested in to it. So all of this happened. I want to go back to the Chicago Mag article written by Brian Smith. He really lays out, I think, a pretty fair case, just showing, some different sides of Dr. Mercola. But some of it is pretty incriminating. So there was this one researcher at Johns Hopkins, and he called Mercola the 21st century equivalent of a snake oil salesman. But he got Mercola's account. He went and interviewed him, and Mercola said, "My critics are wrong on all counts. Far from dispensing dangerous misinformation or trading in conspiracy theories, as some allege, he says he is a champion of taking charge of our own health." So the article goes on to say even Dr. Oz calls him controversial, which totally blows my mind. I mean, to me, Dr. Oz is just like the creme de la creme of bullshit influencing.
Even a real doctor? Is Dr. Oz a doctor?
I think he is. I want to say he was like, would you look it up real quick? I think he was like a heart doctor, a heart surgeon. Yeah, I think he's a real doctor.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he is. This article is also interesting, the one in Chicago Mag, because they got information from Mercola.com. At the time, the website was getting 1.9 million unique visitors per month. So I just want people to understand, like, that is a universe of people coming to a website every month. And then there's an average of nearly 10 times per month. Each of whom returns an average of nearly 10 times per month. So people are repeatedly coming to his site, and it's a lot of new people per month. So again, to reiterate, a very, very wide reach. And in the article, he compares it to he's getting as many hits as the National Institute of Health's website.
Holy cow.
Yeah. And so Mercola claims he has the world's #1 natural health website, and it's like, likely that's true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So then this is kind of where we edge into the mysterious case of causal plane medium. In the article, Mercola actually references the fact that he donates money. And at that time, he had donated 1 million to several alternative medicine groups, including the National Vaccine Information Center. So that organization is important because the following year, in June 2024, after all of this has gone on, Dr. Mercola has had these articles written. I think the New York Times published 2 or 3 different articles about him during COVID, and even created like a little mini series about him and the misinformation that they believed he was spreading. So much has gone on. I think right now we're at about a month. So yeah, last month, June of 2024, the National Vaccine Information Center that he had donated so much money to, they published this blog and sent out a newsletter to their list. So the woman who runs this organization, it's a nonprofit. Her name is Barbara Lowe Fisher. So it's an article and a video. She talks about how she's so thankful for Dr. Mercola and that he donated $300,000 per year over 15 years.
And the National Vaccine Information Center, they're a watchdog agency, right?
So so the story is that her son, I believe, after receiving his MMR vaccine, here's the write-up. It was her son. Yeah, he suffered a convulsion, went into shock, and lost consciousness for 6 hours, a few hours after his 4th DPT shot, diphtheria, pertussis, and tetanus shot. That's her personal story. So after that happened to her, she joined with other parents and founded the National Vaccine Information Center. This was interesting. That was her oldest son. She goes on to say, I got my 2nd and 3rd children all their vaccines with the exception of pertussis because it had hurt her older son. So, in my mind, I'm like, this woman isn't this, like
anti-vax.
Yeah, she's not this extremist. It's like, she saw that this happened. I'm sure it scared the hell out of her. She went ahead and got her other 2 kids vaccinated with the exception of that one vaccine. But then she goes on to say her younger son developed a pseudotumor of the brain after getting 2 vaccines. It's like, we can't know, right? It's like, we can't know. That's the whole problem with the vaccine, injury debate, is it's not well studied. There are many reasons, in my opinion, some of which are pretty dark, that it's not studied. Thousands and thousands and thousands of parents have these stories of witnessing these, connected events. She, in my mind, just her with NVIC, the National Vaccine Information Center, she seemed like, okay, she's not this crazy woman. It's like, she's like trying to make sense of what's happening.
She's trying to tell people there are risks.
Exactly.
Which there are. I mean, there are documented risks. There's a whole database collecting evidence on that. But like you said, it's hard to determine because sometimes it's an immediate reaction. Sometimes it's delayed. Sometimes there's other factors. And I agree. It's not really studied or taken seriously for a reason. Which,
that's,
I get really angry.
I do too. I've talked to a lot of parents over the years, and it seems like look, if it was just this, how they're treated, I think most of the time, like, they go to their primary, they go to the pediatrician, and they're like, hey, I noticed that this happened. Sometimes they are heard and taken care of. Many times it seems like they're sort of brushed off, or they're told like, this could never happen. And it's like, well, it can, like you're saying, there are side effects. To me, this is an issue of public versus personal health. That's kind of how I view it. That is an episode.
It's a whole other,
Who could we call in for that episode? And also, maybe that'll be the last episode we ever published.
We'll be canceled.
I'm like, I'll cancel myself after that. It's so disturbing. So he had donated, though, a lot of money to this organization. He obviously had a lot of trust and wanted to support it. But as of March of 25th, 2024, her organization, NVIC, received an email identified as the new CEO of Mercola.com, letting them know that they were not going to continue their donations to this nonprofit. So then we just started to look around the internet, like, what is happening? So there was her blog that she published. There is this article in Natural Products Insider. It seems like this little, their newsletter that they publish. And I looked them up, and I actually have some interesting information about them. All of these articles, though, kind of came back to this one explanation: companies under new management, and that Dr. Mercola was now being influenced by and taking direction from a person who refers to himself as the Kai and claims to be a psychic channeling the voice of an ancient and wise high vibration entity from the causal plane called Balon. So he calls himself a causal plane medium, hence the title of the podcast. You had no idea what the hell we were talking about. Now you do. So these different articles detail, this whole story. Dr. Mercola has been consulting with this medium. We can't know if all of this is true, but some of the articles say, like, Dr. Mercola thinks he is a god or the new Jesus. This was particularly disturbing to Dr. Mercola's pretty deep Christian base of followers. And then the articles contained references to videos and descriptions of what had taken place at his company in early February. Apparently, Dr. Mercola fired some of his top executives, including his sister, and she posted about that on X. So there's some verification there. People who had worked there for decades. So all of this is happening. People are posting about it on social media. And again, Dr. Mercola, actually, I looked at his Facebook page last night. He's still posting information regularly, but apparently there's some big changes happening, and possibly he is being influenced by this psychic medium. Okay, is there anything else about NVIC? I think we covered it pretty good. I mean, Barbara Fisher Lowe has a fairly interesting Barbara Lowe Fisher. She has a pretty interesting history just as this person who wants to make people aware of vaccine risk. There's a lot of information out there about her. So if that is a rabbit hole you want to go down, you will find a lot. Like she sued Paul Offit, a doctor that is like kind of like the face of vaccine advocacy, especially for children, for a statement that he made about her in Wired magazine in 2009. So there's like legality tied up in this. You know, I'm sure that organization is wondering what's happened to him. Again, it's out there. But the part that we find most interesting is like, okay, is he being influenced by this medium? Who is this medium? And do all of his millions and millions of followers know that this is happening?
Yes. Because this is within like the last year. And I'm curious when he met Kai Clay, who is the so-called trans-channel medium.
Mm-hmm.
How long have they had a relationship? Because when I tried to find this guy, there's like nothing. It's like the internet is scrubbed. The only stuff I can find is from the last couple of years. So, should we talk about Balan?
Yeah. Oh, let me tell you about natural products.
Yes.
So Hannah and I find this article, Natural Products Insider. Actually, when I look up natural products, one of the subpages that comes up on Google, which signifies like people are frequently visiting that page, is the article on Dr. Mercola. So a lot of people are clicking into natural products to learn about this. From what I can see, it's called natural products, but they do all kinds of like product development, supplement development, food development. It's not natural.
Yeah.
It's just the name. So when I got to the website, I see this huge banner on their website and it's like, upgrade your innovation with Epicor postbiotic. Okay. And that, I mean, there's information on postbiotics, like there's research. And then at the bottom, it says a Cargill brand. And I was like, Cargill? Where have I heard that name before? Okay. Cargill. The only reason I know that is because I grew up in Western Kentucky. My family, they still farm in Southern Illinois on the Ohio River. Not organic corn and soybeans. Okay. People, like, this is not like Little House on the Prairie shit. They're doing their best and they're trying to take care of the land, but it's like lots of GMO, highly sprayed. Okay. Cargill buys that corn, or it did in the past. And so I'm like, oh, interesting. They're also creating these like digestive supplements and they're publishing on natural products. So anyway, as far as a source goes, you know, I'm curious to learn more about this company, but they are
it's
one
like
of
a
the
marketing company.
Yeah, it's like
weird. It's a weird marketing company that it sounds like Natural Products Insider sounds like it'll have this board of like doctors or nutritionists or somebody informing this information and writing the articles. And it's this weird conglomerate, like marketing for different products and
like connecting maybe like raw materials to people who want to make products. Anyway, they have one of the most popular articles about Dr. Mercola and one of the only blogs. And it's interesting that they published that. So there's just a little tidbit about that. But yeah, okay. So now is the question, who is this medium that is advising Dr. Mercola? Like what's actually happening?
Yeah. So like I said, you can't find anything on him, which I always find suspicious because I feel like everybody has an internet presence and it's weird to not be able to find a tiny bit about anybody. But I also wonder, it sounds like he's possibly changed his name. He has multiple names he goes by. He goes by Kai Clay. He also goes by Christopher Johnson. And so I don't know which one is him. And apparently one source said he used to be like a high ranking business exec. I don't know where or what, but he looks like he's in his maybe late 50s, mid 60s.
Yeah, I would agree
and
with that.
He says he's been a trance channel for decades and has been channeling Balan, which is a spirit from the causal plane, for decades. So in case you're not aware of what a medium or trance channel is, a medium is, you know, someone who can speak, I guess, or communicate with, usually it's like the dead, or I guess in this case, a spirit from another dimension, another plane of existence. And there's various forms of communication that mediums use. I think back in like the 1800s when spiritualism was a really big deal.
Yes.
If you read about that or watch a movie where that's like the topic, usually the mediums are going into this like deep trance.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're in a deep trance, apparently the spirit that you're in contact with completely takes over your body. And so it can change your facial expressions, change your voice, all these things. And when the medium comes out of that deep trance, they have no recollection of what happened. It's like they gave up their consciousness to this other thing and it took over and is like controlling you.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's less intense forms of mediumship. So Kai Clay, he says he's a trance channel, which means he's not going into a deep trance. It's like a light trance where he's kind of channeling this other being.
Balon.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Balon.
Yeah, he says it in this very distinct,
Yeah.
creepy
So
way.
it is creepy. And we have a clip, at the beginning of this episode. You can listen to him channel Balon. You can watch the videos of him channeling. It's very interesting,
Mm-hmm.
to say the least. So also interesting is that Balon is a trademarked name. I guess he's trademarked it. And his business, Kai Clay's business, which is called Spiritual Mind, that's like the only thing I can find on him is on LinkedIn. And that's also trademarked.
Hannah, okay, I'm sorry. I mean,
Okay.
look, I'm not, I'm like overly charitable, apparently. But to trademark the name of the spirit that I'm like just thinking Whoopi Goldberg and Ghost. Wasn't she a medium?
Yeah.
That was the whole thing. Yeah. Like, would she have trademarked?
That's that. So these are little red flags that keep coming up with this guy that feel very disingenuous. Like, I feel like, because apparently with mediums, you have this relationship if you're channeling this other being or deceased person. It's like you kind of like have a friendship or relationship with them where it's a give and take. Like you agree to be a channel, you agree to let them in, and you can also say not right now, thanks. And so this guy Balon, I don't know the gender, actually I don't know.
Yeah.
This spirit Balon is from like a higher plane of existence, right? The causal plane. And he's talking about how Balon has all these answers to everything and has all this intelligence and things to share. But you have you're trademarking his name and using it to profit. Like,
maybe
really?
he's a business consult spirit.
Also
and that's
possible.
why, yeah. Anyway, okay, I'll let it go. But that, yeah, to me, that is a little bit of like,
yeah, there's
what's
lots of things
happening there?
like, yeah, what? Just check out this guy's website. Look at him. He does public speaking on his website. He says he is like the #1 psychic advisor, that he advises all kinds of health professionals and spiritual gurus, including Buddhist monks. And apparently he's been doing it for a long time, although like you can't find anything on him.
Right.
So the thing that really bugs me is that he brings his 8-year-old daughter, whose name is Sarah Clay, into his events and channelings and readings. And she's on his podcast, which is called the True Future Podcast. You can listen for free. I highly recommend checking that out just to like see what you're dealing with here. So we'll link one of the episodes where they're talking about light language. Mm-hmm. And light language is the language that Kai Clay says Balon speaks. And he can channel Balon while he's speaking the language. And so basically Kai is sitting there with his eyes closed, like waving his hands around, speaking this. Essentially, it sounds like gibberish. Like it's, and there's no way to know. Like, I'm sure that someone who studies language could like recognize maybe patterns or something to say, oh, this sounds like it could be some kind of language. But like for the average person listening, it's just like, just listen to it. I'm not going to like try to repeat it because it's a lot.
It's a lot.
So Kai says he can't speak the language, but his daughter, Sarah, apparently has been able to speak the language since she was born.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. I saw that on. So when I listened to the podcast, she apparently teaches light language classes for kids.
She's 8.
Yeah.
By the way. Yeah. And so she's a translator. And on like when I listen to her and translating this and speaking, it really sounds scripted to me because the way that she's speaking as a child. But I mean, I guess it's possible she's just really comfortable, like in front of a camera or a microphone, and like she's speaking from the heart. I don't know. It like really sets off a lot of alarms, and it makes me very uncomfortable that he is putting his daughter in this position where she's a public figure known for translating a made-up language that he's channeling from the causal plane, and all of it's recorded, and she's 8 and like he's essentially profiting off of her. That really bugs me. Not okay with that. He's also published a book, which he used to sell on Amazon last year, about trans channeling, and now it's out of print. It's not available anymore. You can also book an appointment with him, apparently. Although I've tried to book an appointment several times and no one will answer my phone calls.
Yeah, same. And the number is supposed to, also be applicable to WhatsApp. I tried to contact them through WhatsApp and no answer.
Yeah. So if you go to his website, there's no like contact form. It's just like a phone number, and it's like, call this number. And I call, and I'll let you guys listen to it.
615914635 is not available.
Hi, I was calling to see if I could schedule an appointment with Kai Clay, and this is the number I was given. If you could give me a call back, my number is...
it's basically just me talking to an answering machine, but I'm guessing that they probably screen the calls and decide if they want to call you back or not. That's just my cynical view on how this whole operation would work. But Balon has a pretty big following himself. So on Instagram, he has 27,000 followers, but hasn't really posted much new stuff. On his Instagram, you can see his recordings of him channeling Balon. And I will say that he doesn't get many likes on those posts. And so I always have to wonder, like, I know back in the day you could buy followers. And one of the ways to tell if someone bought followers is if they had like a massive following, but no one was interacting on their content. So I don't know. Also, there's more ways to contact him. You can join his membership. It's called the Light Circle membership. 1 month is $100 and a year is $1,000.
The discount. It's a bulk discount.
So he is, and there are videos of him having meetings with Dr. Mercola, right? Like, and apparently he and Dr. Mercola and Balon are going to write a book, and they have all these plans. And one of the articles I was reading was talking about one of his motivations for firing some of his staff members. There was a religious motivation, and his sister and his staff members that he fired have some connection or personal tie to the Catholic Church. And that, I guess, Balon doesn't like that. I don't know. It's all like...
He's a Presbyterian spirit.
There's not a lot of ways to confirm what he's saying.
Yeah, that was a joke, by the way. We have no idea what's happening. But yeah, I saw that also.
So that's Balon. And yeah, I would love to hear what y'all think, the listeners, about this. I find it very intriguing.
Yeah. And, I'm like hesitant to send traffic his way. Not that we're some, million hit per month podcast, but I do think it is really interesting to hear him channel Balon, supposedly. Hannah and I have talked about it a little bit, off recording. It's creepy. It's creepy. And we're like kind of into this stuff. Like I'm not like I don't have the blanket opinion that this is not possible. I know you're going to go into this more, like research that's been done on this, spirits, psychics, mediums, whatever. I think that there's some really trippy things that happen that we can't explain, that are mysterious, that are also, I hope, helpful to humanity. This just comes off as like the most, I guess we're into the bias portion of the episode. We gave you all the background. It comes off as the creepiest skin crawling shit to me. And I am amazed that people hear this and maybe they feel like touched, but I'm also a cynical person. So yeah.
I feel the same. I think I am a true believer in whatever is possible. Like, I think that there are things unknown that we have, we just can't explain. I've definitely had some very weird and unexplainable things happen to me that I've experienced. Happy to talk about that in any of our future episodes.
I can see us having a whole episode about that. We have to bring Jameson on.
Yes.
Because he's the epitome of bizarre happenings.
But this guy just like, there's so many like warning signs. I don't like it. It just freaks me out. And honestly, like when you watch him channeling and getting these questions from his group or viewers or whatever members, usually it's like seems to be questions like pretty general, like, will I succeed? Am I on the right career path? Am I making the right decision? Am I marrying the right person? Like all of these things that people want reassurance for. And the stuff he says is like so general that I am finding it hard to believe that anybody is invested in him as like a medium. Like I don't understand how they're believing what he's saying, because there are records of mediums who are extremely accurate and they know things that it would be impossible to know. And this guy, I don't see it unless it's just not out there for public view, and that's like in his private sessions. But
seems like you'd put like 2 or 3 really convincing clips out there to draw people in, but who am I? Yeah. And yeah, his daughter, the thing, his young daughter being part of it. I'm with you. There's some red flags to me where I'm like, and to me, there's all these interesting ties. It's like, we can't know for sure. Even, with him and Dr. Mercola, like is this why Dr. Mercola is making these changes? But the tie that is interesting to me the most is like, if Dr. Mercola is getting information from this person, he is speaking to millions and millions of people through his large base of influence. That's who they're being influenced by now too, is Kai Clay channeling Balan. So,
and we don't know who this guy is. The thing with Dr. Mercola that I think made him so successful is that he was a practicing physician. He had the medical background. He was, well known, and, gradually grew this kind of empire. And people, like you said, like the stickiness of his website, like people are returning back again and again because they trust him. Like they really trust him. And when I've heard people in the past speaking about Dr. Mercola or any health related, it's like they view him almost as their doctor or their advisor. And they're like, well, Dr. Mercola says this, Dr. Mercola says that. And it's like this complete like loyalty and trust. And I think it is because they're like, well, he is a real doctor and he is, risking his, I guess, kind of his safety net of like being, a practicing physician to spreading the truth and helping people take things into their own hands and all, his whole message basically.
Yeah, that's absolutely his message.
It develops this, this loyalty. And now if the things he's saying is coming from this dude, like that is way off base for his audience, like I'll be really curious to see what happens when this becomes more well-known. And I wonder if he's been forthcoming about it, perhaps in his newsletters or anything, telling people, hey, I have this new partner. He's a medium. He channels his blonde. Here's like the video of him speaking the light language. Like, what would people do? You know, maybe some people would be like, sure, but I feel like he would lose. I mean, he's losing other, networks, and he's burning bridges. Like,
Yeah. And I really wonder, after looking at the history of like, okay, for, over 10 years, people have kind of been questioning what he's saying. And then during COVID, it got really bad, and the bank accounts being shut down and his YouTube account being shut down. I mean, those are huge, lucrative funnels. It's like, did it really negatively affect him? Just as a man, as a person, that is a lot to go through. So from a financial security piece, yeah, absolutely. We can't know how much Dr. Mercola believes or doesn't believe in what he's saying. I'm really try to give people the benefit of the doubt. If he feels like he is using his platform to put out a message that is also personally important to him and professionally important, and that all that's happening, I can imagine that was incredibly difficult. And could this be the result, is that he's like, okay, well, he's finding solace here somehow. I mean, at the end of the day, we can't know so many things that are happening. But yeah, there's just a lot to say. We'll get there. I know you've done a lot of research, Hannah, on mediums and on psychics. Like, is there any science out there? And this is very interesting. I'm excited to hear about this.
There is science, which is like mind-boggling to me, because I feel like mediums or anyone who identifies as psychic kind of gets like brushed off, like, okay, whatever. Yeah, sure you are. Sure, you can hear voices.
Wouldn't it be amazing if we busted out some peer review on the language of light? Guess what?
Gosh.
We're not going to do that. We couldn't find anything on that. Okay.
Yeah, nothing on the language of light, but there is some peer-reviewed stuff on mediums, specifically people who communicate with the dead and people beyond our plane of existence, I guess. So, oh gosh, where to start? So in the research, there are a pretty good amount of studies like looking at people who are mediums, which I was very surprised about. It is something that's studied and has been studied for a long time. And there's actually way more people that report hearing voices or being mediums than you would think. So one study said that as many as 1 in 25 people hear voices at any given time, and up to 40% report hearing a voice at some time in their life. And most of those people don't meet the criteria for any kind of mental illness. So something also that's interesting is that people who say they're mediums, they have more dissociation symptoms than like you or I, like a person who doesn't report as being a medium, but not as much as someone who meets the threshold for pathological dissociation, like a dissociation disorder. So it's like they're kind of like in the middle.
It's a happy medium.
Yes, exactly.
I'll be here all night. Sorry.
You're so funny. Another cool thing I came across is that a team of Yale scientists have enlisted help from mediums to help them better understand why those with psychosis hear voices.
Whoa.
Which I think is fascinating. So yeah, they're trying to gain insight on what's going on when someone seeks help for psychosis because they're hearing a voice, like what's happening, like what's going on, what can they do to better help them? And so
that's so interesting. Okay, so you put a quote here that is really I've never looked at this part of the research literature. Studying psychics through the lens of voice hearing may give us important insights into why they're able to function so well without the need for psychiatric care.
Yes. And so that like brings us to the point of like, what is the difference? What's the difference between someone who's a medium and who's out there, channeling or trying to help people or whatever, versus someone who is, someone, for instance, with schizophrenia who, hearing voices is one of the symptoms that they're experiencing.
Right.
And so apparently one of the factors that's different is the type, like the relationship you have with that voice. So it's negative versus positive. So someone who's a medium, it seems to be like they have these kind of consensual like relationship with the voice or the person they're channeling. So it's like a friendship almost. And that voice is almost always positive. Versus someone seeking help with psychosis, they're reporting that voice is negative. Like it's saying mean things to them. It's telling them to do, it's not uplifting them in any way. And it's not a welcome voice. It's like something they want to get rid of. Versus a medium is like, sure, we can do this. Like, tell me more. What how can I help you? How can you help me?
And then they can say no, and the voice,
it stops.
Yeah.
Yes. And apparently with channels, people who are channels who go into trance, it's entirely under their control, like only when they want it to happen. And it's usually a long developed relationship, apparently, you have with the person that you're channeling. Another study called Varieties of Voice Hearing, Psychics and the Psychosis Continuum. Because I guess when you think about it, like a continuum, like there's this kind of spectrum, like where are you falling on the spectrum? I thought it was interesting how many people report hearing a voice at some time in their lives, and maybe that's a one-time thing. Maybe you go on to continue to hear that voice. Maybe, like where do you fall? And so in this study, the researchers, this is a direct quote, what they said is, we found the hallucinatory experiences of psychic voice hearers to be very similar to those of patients who were diagnosed. So what they're reporting is very similar. But like I said, what they found in a sample was that people who weren't seeking help but were hearing voices were able to control the onset and offset of the voices they were hearing. They were not distressed by their voice hearing experiences, and that the first time that they admitted to voice hearing, the reception by others was much more likely to be positive.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like the positive aspect and, like you said, consent.
Mm-hmm. And also like the people around them, when they're telling people, I hear this voice, no one's saying, oh, you need to go talk to like a psychiatrist. It's like a supportive environment.
Interesting.
And in that study, it said they used techniques from forensic psychiatry to conclude that the psychics or mediums were not malingering. So basically, they were not making it up. I guess either they were truly experiencing hearing a voice or channeling, or they really genuinely believed that they were. Like they weren't lying about it. So that's super interesting. But then there's actually more. So there are several randomized control trials, which is like a pretty high quality type of study.
Yeah, it's gold standard for research.
Looking at mediums and like if basically they're cons, if they're like telling the truth, like are you really doing this, or is this all a grift?
Yeah.
And the majority of the studies say that it's not a grift, that they are doing it. They have no idea how, but it's essentially real. Like they're making this happen. They are somehow communicating with someone or something. And essentially it's an anomaly.
Wow. This is a meta-analysis. Like it's...
So this meta-analysis was anomalous information reception by mediums, a meta-analysis of the scientific evidence. We'll link it so you can read it if you want. And the conclusion they drew was that the results support the hypothesis that some mediums can retrieve information about deceased persons through unknown means. So most of the studies I couldn't find anything on kind of what Kai Clay says he does, where he's channeling like a spirit from a different plane. But pretty much all of them are mediums who can channel dead people, basically. And so this other one, anomalous information reception by research mediums demonstrated using a novel triple-blind protocol. I tried to read the study protocol and it was like making my brain like hurt, like the way but there is at least a picture in there of like how they did it. So basically they had the mediums and they brought in 2 people who were called sitters who have had someone who is deceased that they would like to communicate with.
Mm-hmm.
And then they assigned each medium 2 sitters. And they basically told the medium kind of false information, like the names of the deceased people or something, and then basically let them go and see what would happen. And at the end of that, the results suggested that certain mediums could anonymously receive accurate information about deceased individuals. And the study design effectively eliminates conventional mechanisms as well as telepathy.
Telepathy? I think
Telepathy.
You know how I know that word is from Stephen King's Carrie, so
Yeah.
maybe not to be trusted, but I'm sure it's tomato.
So in this, what was interesting is like they were exploring all possibilities. So they were like, are these people telepathic? Do they have super ESP, which is like retrieving psychic information from a psychic channel or quantum field? Or, are they experiencing consciousness from continued existence, like beyond death? Like, are they somehow hypersensitive to that? A medium, essentially. And so that study is really interesting to try to read. It's fascinating. And it basically opens up this whole conversation of like, we can't be so quick to, I don't really trust Dr. Mercola's psychic guy.
Right. That's the question. Is Kai Clay actually channeling Balan?
Right. I'm highly skeptical of that guy. I think he might be a grifter. However, I do believe that there are people who may have this ability, and like how, I don't know, but it's really fascinating. And I think my whole thing with science is that like, we know science is always changing. It's not concrete. We have to like admit that there's so much we don't know. Like
we're trying to strike that balance, which is hard. I mean, I have to say, like, in every recording that we've done, every subject that we've looked into, it is difficult to find that balance of like, what is too far and what is, not far enough.
Right.
I think what we often see is not far enough. People get stuck in their bias. They start to make a lot of money off of something, and then like, that's it. And that's all. That's what they believe. Right. Like, I hate to keep bringing up poor Paul Saladino, but like that, like stringent ideas. We're trying to do something different. And it's like, I mean, to me, these studies are very, very interesting, Hannah. This was published in 2021. These aren't like studies from the 1960s or 1970s when, I mean, they could still be valid from those years, but like, these are pretty recent trials.
Yeah.
Hold up.
Yeah. And it's been studied for a long time. So when I was researching this, I came across this man called Chico Xavier. He was from Brazil, and he is one of the most prolific mediums of all time. I had never heard of him. Apparently, he was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize, though, like in the 80s.
Yeah.
So the way that, I guess there's different forms of mediumship. Like you can hear the voice. You can also write, like whatever is being communicated to you. So he was someone who wrote down what he was channeling. And he had like between 400 and 500 pieces of work that he wrote. Most were from deceased poets and writers, apparently.
Yeah.
But he also would write for people who had, lost family members, and write for them, communicating with their family members. And there are studies on him too, basically saying, well, this is pretty accurate. Like, we don't know how to explain it, but how would he know all of this stuff?
We have to set up a trial for Kai Clay.
Yeah. We need to test this guy.
Yeah.
Considering he won't answer my phone calls, I don't know how. Well,
might not happen.
But it's really interesting. And, the guy, Xavier, he never charged anybody anything. That was his thing. Like
he didn't trademark his spirits.
Didn't trademark it. Everything that he published, I'm not sure where the money went to, like a fund, or he donated it or something, but he never made any money and never charged a person a fee for, communicating with someone that they had lost. Like, it was all just
it was his.
Yeah. And
I mean, I'll say, like, I would be okay if that's somebody's gift, like, I was a singer. I got scholarships and got paid to do that. And that's a spectrum, right? Where it's like, Like It to the Stars, with your young daughter, and I'm with you. It feels manipulative when I've heard her on the podcast, trademarking the name. Just when I watch his videos, I'm like, not at all impressed or touched. But I think it's very, very interesting to look at the research that shows, like, okay, this is possible. It just, in my opinion, I'm with you. I don't think that high clay is legit, but maybe influencing one of the biggest influencers in the wellness field, which is a big deal. So now, to me, he is a person that becomes more interesting because of the influence that he may have on Dr. Mercola. Okay, so I kind of know, I mean,
the takeaway.
We've said, like, what we think, and I think our view is pretty clear. I mean, the thing that comes up for me is that who is influencing the influencers? Like, where are they getting their information from? Are they a balanced source? I think when we had Brooke Cates on to talk about the postpartum fitness, she said something that was really, like, personal in a way, which is like, how does that person make you feel, from a fitness perspective, or, how you feel about your body image. But I think, like, using your gut sense is a good idea. It's really hard if you're not research literate or you don't have a science background to know in the wellness space what is legit and what is not. A lot of what's out there sounds really intuitive, but the reality is that a lot of times the body is counterintuitive. So I'm curious about that. Who is influencing the influencers? In this case, it sounds like Dr. Mercola is being influenced by what to me sounds just like a batshit crazy man. And then the other pieces that I think about, there's kind of three big takeaways. Influencing the influencer. This is the most interesting to me, is how far can an influencer go before their followers say that's too far? We have seen people go pretty far. I mean, we've covered now breatharianism. Some influencers are saying only eat beef and salt and water, cut out entire food groups that have reams and reams of research reporting it. Influencers will say a lot and people will stick with them, in my opinion, because it agrees with our bias. But when somebody goes against what our bias is, or says something, that's across that line, I'm basically curious where that line is. And if people are examining, okay, is this something I disagree with because I think it's just inaccurate or maybe dangerous or like that? Or do I disagree with it because it's not how I feel or think? And I think having that critical thinking part of us aware all the time, we know when we're being influenced. We go on social media, we go on YouTube, all of these platforms are, at this point, everybody's aware that they're being influenced. To have that filter on is pretty smart. It's at least going to save you some money. And then the third piece, I think, is, this piece we kind of covered in the first one, but, like, how can someone who's not a medical professional separate the good stuff from the crap? So again, these are all lines I think that run through our show, but this example of how, all of these are question marks. Dr. Mercola is being influenced by this guy who, seems very out of it. This is a perfect example of, I think, kind of what the podcast is about. And again, to come back to, like, I feel for Dr. Mercola, to be honest with you, but like I do for a lot of these people. It's like everybody's just trying to make it, right? We're in this, like, bizarre capitalism is the best model we've come up with. It's all so digital. There's so much information. And I do think people have their passions and many of them see this work as a vocation. But then if you're making, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars a year, how do you keep your true north? There's a lot going on. So I'm not saying I'm just against Dr. Mercola, but I do think it's important to ask these questions. So what do you think, Hannah? What is your
same?
takeaway?
Yeah, I'm interested to see where this goes and what happens with his following and who sticks around and who doesn't. And I mean, you can't really come back from this, I feel like, once you've it's on record that you're consulting with a medium who potentially is just a con artist, and everybody knows that.
The wild thing is, I'm so curious to see who will be yes, I'm totally into it. Yeah,
I mean, some people might, and that's why the medical medium.
I know he's coming up next month. We're getting to it.
Oh, the medical medium. But people love it. I mean, he's very open with that. And we'll talk more about that in that episode. But maybe people who love the medical medium will now come to Dr. Mercola and be into him. I mean, it is interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean,
interesting.
You bring up the medical medium is actually, to me, the perfect example of why I think it is important to know, where are these people getting information from? How far is too far? How do you separate the good stuff from the bad stuff? Because there actually is at least one documented death that is related to the medical medium's influence. And it's actually kind of how I started to learn more about him. And I think you too, we were through grad school and he kind of came on the scene and I was like, okay, celery juice, whatever. I just kind of didn't pay attention. I'm like, he's not in the primary literature. He's not on my radar. But then this article came out about the woman who died of breast cancer because she was basically just I don't need to go to a doctor. Yeah. And then it lit a fuse under my ass because that is a really important topic to me. But to your point, it's some people really, really love his work. And I imagine still stand by him even after learning that, influencing, you can actually be influenced to death. It's where the name of this podcast came from. So yeah, I just hope that, this is the mission of my life, that balanced, accurate information, what actually is what our focus is. Can we just try to find out what is versus what we think is or what we want to be? And to me, the most fun way to do it is to explore it on this podcast with you. So here we are.
Yay. Well, for everybody listening, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I would too.
If you have any experience with mediums, we might do another episode focused more on spirituality and medium because there's so much interesting stuff out there. I mean, there's cultural tie-ins or traditions. There's lots of things that have been studied and lots of unknowns. And it's a really fun topic for me, at least.
Yeah. Me too. This is the behind the scenes stuff that I think is interesting. I'm I can't believe I haven't looked on, PubMed for this.
You wouldn't think to.
No.
Who knew it exists? So cool. I would love to be that researcher that studies that.
Girl, you should. That's your next graduate degree. Okay. Anything else on Dr. Mercola and what is it? The mysterious case of Dr. Mercola and the causal plane medium. That's some of the best copy I've ever written, by the way.
Good.
Okay. I will see you in the next episode, Hannah.
All right. See you then.
Bye.
Bye.